say less. I won't just say yes. Need you to do more than say less. I thought you knew that anybody can do that.
I had a conversation with Steve Bannon in 2015. I believe it was 2015, Smiz, where we had that interview with him. 2016? Okay. And it was in that moment that I realized his goal was not the United States of America. He wanted to overthrow this government. He wanted to dismantle this government because he has a global plan. He has a global plan. And it has been planned for a while. Project 2025, I think, is just one little hint, even though it's damn near 1,000 pages, which means they put a lot of thought into it. But this has been going on for quite some time. It's a global plan. And we're seeing it play out in Germany. Germany is fighting back fascism. Mm-hmm. How wild is that? Germany, Sweden, Switzerland. I mean, it's wild. United States of America. And here we are. I'm going to play a 39-second clip from Steve Bannon, and then we're going to talk. I also want to give out the number because we're going to ask some questions of you today. 866-801-8255. 866-801-TALK is the number. Smith, play the clip.
Come retribution! For the TV audience, we just had Johnny Mckinty on here, one of President Trump's closest advisors. Johnny's going to be running all personnel. He's actually the guy overcharged of all Project 2025. This is for Joy Ann Reid, Chris Hayes, Rachel Maddow, and my favorite, Morning Miko. Suck on this. 3,000 day one to take down the administrative state brick by brick. Your days of leeching off the government and have the government leech off the American people over.
Days are over.
Where are they now?
We're going to take down the administration state brick by brick. They're moving Washington into these rural areas. All you DC, all you government workers, you're going to lose your jobs if Trump takes. And I'm not scaring you. He said that. He's taking all of the DC jobs and putting them in places like Arkansas, Texas, Florida. They're not going to be in DC. Good government jobs, mostly are black people, by the way. Let me just say, the black people, a lot of y'all middle class built your middle classdom off of the government, good government jobs. That's something my daddy wanted me to do. Get you a good government job, because with your personality, you're going to be fired a lot. That's what he said. I said, yeah, all right, Dad, I got this. He wasn't wrong. But yeah, that's us. They're targeting us. We've been talking, Pam. We're not centering. This is not an opposition to, but I think we need to know where we are. Yep. So let's walk down where we are right now.
I mean, we are a diaspora in this country of not monolithic thinking, but very interconnected in terms of what we want and what we need and what we're looking for. Who have been basically driven apart to our lowest common denominator by umpteen factors, but who, when we do move in concert, when we do move in unity, can get amazing, incredible things done for our community, which is why there are so many things put in place to keep us from doing that. And it was a trip to South Africa that really kind of opened my eyes and made me really think. It was, because I spent several years in Brazil when I was a child, and I got an exposure to Black people in a country where there's no clear definition of what is and what is not Blackness. Then I went to South Africa, and I got hip to a country where the overwhelming majority of people are Black, but they don't interconnect with each other in that same way because they actually break down along tribal lines. And it helped me to crystallize in my mind what a gift we have in the United States. What a gift it is that a Black person from Arkansas and a Black person from Oakland and a Black person from Mississippi or Massachusetts have at least some common language, common legal engagement with our government, and common cultural experiences that allow us to talk to each other and build community. And yet, we do very little to leverage that. We always think of ourselves as 14% of the population. And in any one place, we are 14% of the population. Some places will be 26, some places will be 8, but all the aggregate, we're 14. But we're also enough of the major cities of America to run the states in which those cities exist. right? Illinois is run out of Chicago. New York is run out of New York City, right? Most of our
Michigan out of Detroit.
Michigan's
Yeah.
in Detroit, and we have enough power in those city centers to drive the politics from there if we think strategically. What I've concluded is that we don't leverage what we have. And what I've and what really crystallized that for me was to look as in my candidate experience at groups that do actually do an amazing job of leveraging what they have. Right? I looked at APAC. I looked at the conservative groups. I
So
looked
let's
at
pause. What is APAC?
APAC is the American Israel political alliance or something like that. It's a lobby, technically. It's a lobby that lobbies on behalf of Israel. And one of the things that I learned, because I was a candidate, when you're a candidate, especially in a swing district in the state of Florida, you're going to get approached by these groups and they're going to vet you. They're going to try to figure out, are you friend or foe? And the way APAC worked back then, it doesn't work. It still does that, but now it actually gives direct to candidates. But back then, it didn't give direct to candidates. What it did was it vetted candidates, and then it told its network of 3 million people to support the candidates that they like. So it looked like just contributions from Americans, but they funneled it through one group that made that policy vetting. So if you're sitting here wondering, how is it possible that APAC, that the United States still gives money to Israel in the way that it gives to Israel, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, why are Black politicians hard up on funding Israel? Well, it's because APAC has, and that process has made the funding of your campaign inextricably tied to your ability to stay in office. Right. And you can't keep that funding if you don't toe the line on funding Israel. It becomes that simple.
So let's pause, because when we think of running for office, you think, hey, I live in a community. I want to serve this community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go out and get the signatures, because that's the first thing. You have to go get signatures, and you have to file papers to say I'm running to get on the ballot. But the signatures get you on the ballot. And then you get a knock on the door, you get an email. And by the way, APAC is American Israel Public Affairs Committee. That's what it stands for. So how do they reach out?
Well, they just reached out to my campaign manager, right? Once they saw who I was, and the first thing they wanted to know was what was my position on Israel's right to defend itself, a very vague statement, mind you. It wanted to know my position on expansion of the settlements. It wanted to know my position on two-state solution I mean, these are pretty detailed things. I had to write a white paper on my positions, right, to explain to them. And they're not vetting to decide whether they are going to give me money. They're going to give the green light to their donor base or the red light. Or they can dump a bunch of money in a PAC to oppose me if they think I'm a threat, which is what they do to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and all of them. And so you have to understand that what AIPAC did was leverage the common interest of the Jewish community in the United States, connected it to the political interest of Israel as a country, right? And then forced every candidate out there to declare themselves friend or foe to their issue. And we're like, okay, you're going to vote for this every single time, because if not, we're not only going to pull our support, but we're going to pour our money into an opposition. That's why I call it political bullying, right? But what they did was
pause though, Pam, because there's nothing wrong with that. As you're talking, I'm asking, is the equivalent to that the NAACP?
And that's the question, Karen. No.
Is the equivalent to APAC the Urban League?
Nope.
Is the
we don't
equivalent?
Have an equivalent to that.
Is it
we don't have an
the
equivalent.
National Action? It's not. There's no equivalent. Why
There's no
not?
equivalent to that.
Why not?
And that's the question I've been asking myself all this time. Pourquoi? Because we are too easily satisfied by seeing black faces in Congress, by seeing black faces in State House and State Senate. As long as they're there, we think they're working for us. And we are mistaken about that. Right?
Okay.
Because rule number 1 of politics is get in power. Rule number 2 of politics is stay in power. And rule number 3 of politics is see rules numbers 1 and 2. Right.
8668. Wait, hold on. Let me put out the number, because we're gonna have a conversation today. And APAC is an example, because there are many organizations that lobby. What's the organization that literally hands legislation to the folk that they support and say, "Here, push this through"?
Oh, I mean, there are many. Which one?
All of them. Here's what we want. Just cut and paste.
The Grover Norquist, no new taxes pledge. I mean, there are all kinds of organizations that do that. Sadly, I don't know of any Black organization that does that. I don't know of any Black organization that actually lobbies. I don't know of any Black lobbying firm. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm saying as a Democratic nominee in the state of Florida in the swing district, I never saw one, right?
And they didn't reach out to you?
None of them, right?
They should.
NAACP does not get involved in politics by its own charter. It does not do that, right? Urban League certainly doesn't do that. None of our fraternities and sororities do that. They may have small, thank God Alpha Kappa Alpha started a PAC. There's some others that have started a PAC, but I still don't think they're leveraging that the way they could, right? Because they're not truly leveraging their membership. They're just saying, hey, if you want to give, we can help brothers or sisters so-and-so, but they're not really leveraging what they have to make that really impactful. Something I put in this outline that I sent you. But when you talk about what the Jewish community has done, and believe me, I have nothing but respect for the Jewish community in this country, even though we strongly disagree on the issues of Israel, I still make common cause with me on so many other issues. But one thing I will, they're far less than 14% of this population, and they punch way above their weight in political influence. How is that possible? Because they think of how to connect the dots between them and leverage that greater capacity to move. And we have in the Black community an immense capacity to move in concert that we do not use. We do not have organizations and institutions for that purpose. We don't have Black think tanks. We have Black thinkers all over this country, but we don't have Black think tanks. We don't have Black lobbying firms. We don't have a Black-based preparing and vetting judges for state and federal judicial appointments. We don't send, the Black community does not send a list of our preferred Black judges to Joe Biden's office for federal court appointments. Pourquoi? Yeah, I'm befuddled by that. I'm befuddled. Everybody thinks, oh, we have BALSA at law schools, Black Law Students Association. It's a good thing. I was at BALSA at Boston College Law School. They also have Federalist Society at Boston College Law School. What is the difference between those two organizations? BALSA is designed to help Black kids get through law school. Federalist Society is designed to get those kids into positions of power in government.
Ooh, 866-801-8255. Okay. All right, I'm taking notes. I was just thinking about Ice Miller. I don't know if that's a lobbyist group. I know they're a public affairs group. They do both law and lobbying, but yes. Okay. Is that Black? I don't know if they're Black owned, but I know a lot of Black folk came through them that have been on this show. So they're out there doing some things.
Right. Okay. But the reason, it's not that we don't have Black lobbyists. We do. Because they're Black members of Congress. So white firms hire Black people to lobby Black congressmen. That's unusual. But we don't have a firm whose mission is to draft and push policy beneficial to the Black community. That's what we don't have, right? Because people think members of Congress do that members of Congress write legislation. Very few do. Most do not. Most just sign on to whatever the party pushes. And most are too lazy to write their own legislation. Some, you can look at like Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, she's a nerd. She likes to write her own legislation and get things done. That's great. There are people who parlay on certain issues. There's some that have their pet issue, be it a veterans issue or whatever. But the thing is, if we want, I want to take just a basic example for the audience to understand why I think this way. If we decided as a community that we wanted HBCU funding parity, meaning that every state that receives federal funds for higher education must fund its HBCUs, its public HBCUs, per capita the same way they fund white PWIs in their state, right? So let's take a state like Florida. If you give money, if the state of Florida funds Florida State and Florida, it has to fund Florida A&M per capita in the same way. Now, that is a simple piece of legislation, right? Who writes that legislation? Did Florida A&M write that legislation? No, because Florida A&M's leadership thinks about it. It looks inward. It doesn't look outward. right? It looks inward. So it's looking to the Florida legislature for funding and blah, blah, blah. And it's not actually thinking, how do we leverage our entire alumni network and all of the other HBCUs and all of our social media influencers and all of our fraternities and sororities and all of our influencers to get a piece of legislation and to demand that every white candidate that needs Black votes to win is now forced to agree to this piece of legislation to retain their own power, because that's what AIPAC does. It says, if you want to retain your own power, Frederica Wilson, Richie Torres, you must agree to fund Israel. That's how
And what are they going to do? And what are they going to do? And because most of us don't know what they're doing. Oh, I love the hat. Oh, she's on the thing. Oh, he raps very well. Oh, I like.
We don't even see that Frederica Wilson is a member of Congress from the state of Florida. She's my sorority sister. I've met her. I've talked to her on several occasions, but she has never proposed a piece of legislation to require equitable funding of HBCUs at the federal level, right? Neither has Benny Thompson, right? Neither has, I mean, I have respect for these members of Congress. I'm not trying to throw shade on them. I'm just saying they don't do it.
Because they haven't been asked to do it. Because I contend, Pam Keith, that it's not nefarious. It's the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Like, so we need to squeak more, right? I feel like they're not being like evil. We're not asking them for anything.
Exactly. We have these very vague asks, and that's not how corporate America works. When I was knocking doors, people came to me and said, what are you going to do for me? I'm like, that's the wrong question, right? The right question is, can you increase my housing stipend by $50 for the next 6 years? That's a question, right? We don't know what to ask. So when corporate America approaches policymakers, it doesn't say, what are you going to do for the energy sector? It doesn't ask, how are you going to make my life better as a pharmaceutical company? Right? They say, I'm going to draft the legislation that's going to make my life better as a pharmaceutical company, and I'm going to demand that you sign on to this piece of legislation and that you sponsor it, and I'm going to follow up with you. I'm going to throw money at you. I'm going to take you to nice dinners on the vineyard and whatever, and that's how I'm going to build a relationship, and I'm going to check in on you every couple of weeks, and you're going to see my staff in your office, and that's how I know you're going to do what I want.
I contend, though, and I would love to hear from you, that we don't know what we want or need because we've never sat to think about it. What do we actually need? So that's why the first question in Nubia, in an Onyx Society, and I'm inviting all of those who are in Nubia to join the Onyx Society, ONYX Society. Just type that into the groups and then hit join. What is the first issue we should tackle? And I just want us to start thinking through it. I don't know what the answer is, but the exercise itself will land us in some good waters.
Right. So when I first got into politics, Karen, I wrote 5 pillars of a platform for the Black community, right? That addressed economic issues, health issues, education issues, personal safety and security issues, and political power, right? Like those, and I wrote it out and I put it on a little palm card, and I literally paid out of my pocket, and I gave this little palm card out to people when I met them, when I was campaigning. I'm saying, this is what we should be asking for. And each pillar had several proposals underneath that would specifically move government money into the Black community, that would specifically protect Black and brown boys and girls, that would specifically elevate education and opportunities for Black people. And I put it in writing, and I said, this is what I think we should be asking for. Now, I'm not saying my ideas were perfect. I'm just saying, once you put pen to paper, you make it real. If I say I want to see the number of federal contractors that are Black-owned businesses go up from 10% to 14%, that is a goal. That is a number that is fixed. And I can say, these are the things that I'm going to implement to make that so. And this is how we're going to fund an office to track those numbers. And this is how we're going to actually encourage young people to be entrepreneurial, go into vocations that can actually become government contractors. Like, now you start to see which direction you're going. But as long as I have lived in this country, which is, all my life, and I'm not a spring chicken, I have never seen or heard of an organization that actually does that.
So we're going to start one. And I'm a little sad that we're in 2024. So you're saying not a Frederick Douglass, not a, like, I'm just thinking politically throughout the annals of time. There's never been a group that has this as its mission.
If you know of one, I'm all ears.
Okay, and we'll put that out to the audience because, again, our omniscience requires all of us to participate. Somebody knows something that we don't know. We don't know everything. So if there is an organization or a group, let us know, and then we'll partner with them instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. I feel like we're in a nation of people who I discovered this, but never looked to see if anybody else did it before them. And so then you rewrite history. It's like, I was the first.
I'm sure there have always been groups of people who think on this level. I would even say, if you look at the Nation of Islam has people that were thinking like that. Malcolm X had thoughts like that. Marcus Garvey had thoughts like that, but they are always in competition with each other. They're always very sectarian or very tribal or very territorial or very regional or whatever. And I'm just not looking to work on that level. I believe that we need to be focused on the levers of government at the federal, state, and municipal level. Why is it that schools in Black communities are so dilapidated and schools in white communities always look good? Because our public education funding is based on local tax base. Does it have to be funded that way? No. Have we ever gotten together and said, hey, the way we fund public schools in America is shitty and wrong, and that what we really should be doing is having universal, equitable public education funding so that your zip code does not determine the quality of your public education. We could make that happen if we got our act together to do that. We could start the conversation, right? We could start a legitimate national conversation about why it is that redlining and ghettoizing of America made sure that resources were always easy to allocate to the Blacks and the whites. And the legacy of that is that every state and every major city has Black hoods. All of them have that. That's not by accident. That was by design, but we can undesign it.
We can undesign it or design something different and follow that.
Something different, better, and more equitable. But I'm just saying, if we wanted our kids to have a fair shot and to be really in great schools, we absolutely could make that happen, because if we just leverage what we have, we can make that happen. We just don't.
Let's head over to the phones. 866-801-8255. The question of the day is, what would be the first issue to tackle? And you could talk about if you have an organization, if there's an organization out there that is already doing this, that have been doing this for a while, that has infrastructure, because that's the thing. I always ask origin stories, like, how did APEC and the Federalist Society and Heritage Foundation, and what's the one that sponsored that the Heritage did the Project 2025? That was them, right?
Well, that was some other group. I don't even know what
all these groups. What's the group with the funny Charlie Kirk's group? I mean, he's 20-something years. Like, how did these groups?
All of them.
Yeah. How did they all form? Somebody helped fund them, and then they're out there doing all of this havoc. We need to at least build something to protect ourselves, or to build a future that we want to live in.
And so what I tell people is, the thing that's missing in the Black community is not the capacity to move collectively. It's a centrifugal force around which to move. Right? It's a lodestar. It's the thing we're missing, the mothership. We got a whole lot of warriors out there. We got a whole lot of spaceships out there. They're all doing their, good things. But we don't have a mothership that's directing the whole crew. And that's the problem, in my view. And so, when you ask me what to start with, I mean, personally, I would say, let's just start with something that's relatively hermetically sealed, easy to understand and easy to push. I would start with equitable funding of HBCUs. Why? Because it's a great test case. It's a great test to discern how do we get all of our community to move in one direction to get one
Right.
thing done. Because once we
Who would
prove,
be against this? So you got to
right,
find something that, you know, because you, who would be like,
right.
no, I'm black and I think they shouldn't get any money.
Well, exactly, because so that's politically toxic. The Democratic Party, if we win this next election the way I think we will, you know, the Democratic Party will not be able to just tell us to just go do whatever, right? We would have a situation if we have the Senate, the House, and the White House and Congress, then all of a sudden, you know, we have all the levers there, right? And why not see if we can get all of the Black Greek organizations, all right, the Coalition of 100 Men, the Links, the Jack and Jill, the Eastern Stars, the Masons, get all of the Boulay, get all of the groups that we have on one page for one ask. Federal legislation that mandates equitable funding of HBCUs on par with PWIs in all states that receive federal education funding.
And since you've done a little bit of the research, by the way, it was the Heritage Foundation that did Project 2025. Charlie Kirk will be 31 in October. He's the director, executive director of Turning Point. But again, he was doing that in his 20s. I think did he graduate from college? I think he dropped out and went to high school. Harper College, not sure where that is, but that's neither here nor there. As you research this one issue, what impact would that have to
it would have an
equal dollars funding the HBCUs? What impact would that have?
Instantaneously, you would be upgrading the physical plant of all of these universities, new buildings, new dorms, and not only that, but then you would start to get federal funding for scientific and educational grants, research. You would start to get research and development in these HBCUs that are not there, even though they have the capacity. You would start to increase the number of students that they accept, so they would increase student body size. It would really start to create competition between Florida State and FAMU. They're both in Tallahassee. Why would one kid go to one place and the other? Well, if you've ever been to Tallahassee, the campus of FSU don't look anything like the campus of FAMU. Right?
Come on. And that furthers the narrative that somehow something's deficient with being black. But
exactly.
we never get to the root of it, right? So let's do that.
But by increasing that funding, you're going to increase the quality and number of professors. Right, you're going to increase the competition to get into these schools. You're going to up and the programs that they can offer, the majors that they can offer. Right, like it's game changing. And I'm just saying that if we as a community decided that this is what we want, if you heard it out of Beyonce and LeBron, and you heard it out of Deion Sanders, and you heard it out of everybody had hashtag HBCU equality on their shoes and on their Twitter and on their TikTok and whatever, then all of a sudden it would become a thing. And we would force those who are against it to explain why they're against it.
I won't just say yes. I need you to do more and say less. I won't just say yes. Need you to do more and say less.